that is the bad loans. When the bad loans affecting your NPA, your balance sheet is affected, now you sell it. Dehradun, very good, you have used the word asset recovery institutions. Yes, to a certain extent we can say that, because when these bad banks, they purchase these NPAs, obviously they purchase it at a discount, right. I just give you an example. Suppose a bank has 100 crore as NPA and it wants to get rid of it. So what will it do? It will transfer this 100 crore asset or sell it to some bad bank. Bad bank is a popular word, but the appropriate word is asset reconstruction companies, ARCs, right. But when you use bad bank, it is okay. So asset reconstruction companies, because that gives you some meaning, asset reconstruction companies. So they will buy the NPA 100 crore, but not at this rate. They may pay just 50% of it, because this is not good asset, this is bad asset. Obviously, in the process, the bank will lose 50 crore. So they will have to absorb that loss that year using their profits. So in that year, the total profit will be less by 50 crore. So what is the benefit of it? Now your NPA is down, so you are a safer bank. That is also known as cleaning of the balance sheet. Your balance sheet is stronger today, right? Like we say good company and bad company. What is a good company? Which has more assets and less liabilities. That is a good company. What is a bad company? A bad institution where your assets are less and liabilities are more. So now this bank should reduce its bad asset. What that bad bank will do? Now the same thing they will do. They will try to recover it through the mechanisms available, and they expect to receive more than 50 crore, not 100 crore exactly, but maybe more than 50, 60 crore, maybe 55 crore, whatever more they can recover, that is the profit. So it is another sort of business, right. So that is what the FM mentioned. But I tell you one more thing. It is not that this is the first time we are talking about bad banks. In fact, all the major banks in India, they already have the ARCs. And this is going on for more than 20 years. So what is new in this announcement? The new thing is that all the ARCs that we have, the first ARC was set up, that was called Asset Reconstruction Company of India Limited in 1990s. But what is the problem with the ARCs that we have? They are small ARCs. Their loss absorption capacity, their own capital is not much. So they are not in a position to purchase lot of NPAs. Government wants to have a big ARC, where there may be some capital infusion by the government and also private participation, so that it has the capacity to absorb more and more NPA, because as the economy grows, the risk will also increase, NPAs will also increase. Now we have to be a mechanism for that, so that there are no bank failures in India. For that we have to have that institution. So it is a sort of preparation, right. Dehradun is saying that NPAs may rise as high as 14.8%. It may rise even higher than that. And what is the prescribed limit for NPA? 8%. So it is already higher than the prescribed limit, right. So these are all the issues. Now bad bank, as it emerged in that budget speech, so for this year it is important. But once this process is complete, maybe next year it is not important. Somebody is asking that can we say that ARCs are the black hole for NPAs? Actually, black hole is a negative word, and I would not like to use a negative word for a positive thing, right. Because transferring NPA to ARC is something positive. that we are trying to do. So, do not use the word black hole, but yes, they are converting the bad assets into good assets. So, that is a positive action, okay? And always use appropriate word, whatever, if the context is positive, never use negative word to say that, right? Otherwise, the meanings will change. So, I hope you understand. I just gave you a small description of it. Later on, we can go for a detailed discussion. So, this was about one thing, monetary system. So, now you realize how much you have to study, starting from the concept of money to inflation to RBI, its function, credit policy. And when I say credit policy, all those words are involved. For example, the repo rate, reverse repo rate, right, bank rate, open market operations, CRR, SLR, and whatever new is coming, that is to be covered. Now, this was the monetary stability. I am going back to the previous page. Now, another Atul is asking, and there are lot many questions coming from NPA and ARCs. I cannot go in much detail because this right now I am discussing the introductory part of it. So, I am just introducing headings to you. I am not discussing any heading right now, right. So, fiscal, what is the meaning of fiscal? Now, fiscal word is used for anything that is related with income and expenditure of the government, right. Income and expenditure of the government. Now, budget, what is budget? In the budget, we have an estimate how much the government will receive, how much the government will spend during the year. So, budget is very much part of the fiscal policy. But when we say receipts of the government or income of the government, what is the major source of it? Taxation, obviously, tax revenue you can say. Now, taxation is one area that is very important. What is the concepts related with the concepts related with taxation? Now, there may be simple words like what is direct tax, what is indirect tax, like this, or there may be taxation related theories or concepts like what is progressive taxation. So, it is a concept. What is a regressive taxation? What is ad valorem taxation? What is a specific taxation, right? What are the principles that guide taxation policy? Like one policy is called principle of equity, right? So, this, and then at the same time we have tax reforms going on. It all started many years ago with VAT system, VAT VAT, value added tax system was introduced, and that was introduced in 80s only, but that was a very gradual thing. But now this reform is very fast. Now we are discussing GST today. So, GST is nothing but next stage of VAT. So, all this started 40 years ago, and this is all political, that political people and political parties say that I did this, they did that. Don't go into that. The reality is reforms started 40 years ago during 1980s. VAT was introduced on experimental basis, then it was enlarged, then came SENVAT, then came state level VAT, then came GST. All the political parties in power, whether they like it or not, they all did it, whether it was positive or negative, whether you appreciate it or not, all the political parties from time to time they did it. But your focus should be on reforms. What all reforms? What are the challenges? Why some people oppose it? What further reforms? These are the issues we have to be, we should involve ourselves, not who is saying what. That is not our concern. So, this is one part of our discussion. Then, what is fiscal balance? Because I am talking about stability. What is fiscal stability? Again, it means there should be a balance between the government's income and expenditure. That is fiscal balance. But here again, the balance does not mean perfect balance, means income is equal to expenditure. That will not happen in India, because India is an emerging economy, fast growing economy. Our expenditure needs are more. So, there will always be a deficit. But that deficit should be under control. So, fiscal stability means, in simplest way, if you say what is fiscal stability, so you just tell that fiscal deficit should be under control. That is stability, right? Fiscal deficit should be under control. Now, many of the economies or the countries, their governments, from time to time they have defined what is that appropriate level of deficit or the safe level of deficit. You know, it is very interesting that people talk a lot about 3% fiscal deficit. You may be reading about this, but nobody is telling from where we get this 3%. Why 3%? Why not 5%? Why not 4%? Why 3%? In fact, you know, just when it was 90s, when there was integration of European economies. First there was integration of economies, then they decided to go for monetary union. Right. Monetary union means, economic union means it is related with freedom regarding import export without paying import duties, that is economic integration. Then next level was monetary union. Monetary union means now they wanted single currency for the group. Now Britain opted out, said no, I am comfortable with my pound, I will not participate. Rest of the economies participated, and they said okay fine, we will use euro, a common currency. But the problem that these countries faced was that fiscal policy, means budget making, is something related with individual countries. But you said monetary policy will be common. How is it possible? 15 odd countries, and now there are more. It started with 15. So now many countries using the same currency, and at the same time they say that we will have our own fiscal policies. Fiscal policy means income and expenditure related policies. So they said okay, we should have an agreement regarding this, and that agreement was that all the member economies, they will make sure that the fiscal deficit will not be more than 3% of GDP, and the debt of the government will not be more than 60% of the GDP, right. And then other countries also adopted all this, and this became international norm and nobody questioned it. But I tell you, US does not follow any of this norm. You know which is the most indebted country in the world? It is US. And you know what is the US debt total? It is almost equal to their GDP, means 100% of GDP. Their GDP is approximately $27 trillion, so their debt is also almost at the same level. And nobody questions US why your debt is 100% of GDP. No rating agency will go and ask Federal Reserve of America why you are doing it, why you are allowing your government to do it. No. But obviously, the problem is that there are certain Western norms and there are institutions involved. They want to impose everything on third world countries, that this is our European norm, and if this is good for us, this is good for you also, and if you breach those norms, your economy is not in good shape. And unfortunately, many of our experts also, they give lot of importance to those rating agencies. I am not criticizing them, but they should come out with different policies for different set of economies, because all the economies, they cannot follow the same set of rules. But now, you know what happened during the COVID period. Last year when the budget was presented, the government said we will try to get 3.5% of GDP, but ultimately due to COVID and extraordinary increase in expenditure and extraordinary decrease in revenue, our fiscal deficit is 9.5%. And now they have come out that okay, we have a plan, midterm plan. In next 5 years, we will bring it down to 4.5%. It means, I do not know whether they will go back to 3% or not, but my judgment is that in 5 years, if they say that we will bring it down to 4.5%, there may be a possibility that now we are moving away from Western norms. That will be confirmed in few years. But why I am saying this? Because the 15th Finance Commission that presented the recommendation also said that by 25-26 the government should bring it down to 4%. It means even the Finance Commission is not suggesting 3% in next 5 years. So, the only difference between the opinion of the government and opinion of the 15th Finance Commission is 0.5. Government is saying 4.5, 15th Finance Commission is saying 4, and still if some people are writing the articles that our fiscal policy is in bad shape, I do not know what to say. It means you believe that your opinion is more important than the opinion of the 15th Finance Commission, where we have the stalwarts like N.K. Singh, chairman of that commission, supported by the best experts of the domain. They come out and say that the government should reach at 4%, and then somebody says that no, it is not 3%, so it is bad. So, you should be able to take care of these issues also. You have to go by your institutions first. That is what I want to recommend. I am not saying go by the politicians, I say go by your own institutions, rather than focusing on international rating agencies, because what Standard & Poor says, I do not care for that, because you have some international norms, but I believe on my national norms, and these national norms are given by our own experts considering our own circumstances, right. So, we need to, okay, the concept of fiscal stability is fine, the debt should be under control, the deficit should be, that is fine. But what will be that level of debt, what will be that level of deficit, that should be customized according to the need of the country. You cannot not have a general prescription for each and every country in the world, that 3% for every country in the world. How anybody can say that? It is just like the same medicine for every kind of illness. Like in our villages, there are doctors, right? They are not qualified, they are not actually qualified doctors, but they are practicing doctors. Jhola chap that you say, right? In North India, we say jhola chap. So what they say, they know certain medicines, and whatever problem you have, they will give you the same medicine. It is just like that. Okay. So this issue is going to remain alive during the year. That is why I am focusing on this. I am just commenting on this, right. So just take care of this aspect. Then obviously the expenditure side, when we say, in expenditure side we have many things, even in income side we have other issues, like one source of income of the government is disinvestment, right. And this year, last year also, there is ambitious target for disinvestment. Now that is a topic to be discussed in industrial policy, because disinvestment is a part of the industrial policy, right. Now just a definition I will give you, I will not go into the detailed discussion. You know, investment and disinvestment. Investment, if you understand, then disinvestment is easy. We are all investors. Many people in India, they are buying assets. Somebody is buying gold, somebody is buying property, somebody is buying shares. So investment means purchase of assets. Very simple definition I am telling to you. What is investment? So investment is just purchase of the asset. So what is disinvestment? Selling of assets. Very simple. So what is disinvestment? Sometimes you know, these things, these type of things you face in interview, that you can speak, say 5 minutes on that topic, but the board says no, you just say this in one sentence, we don't have much time, you just say this. So these things will help you in these circumstances. So disinvestment is selling of assets. So now the government is selling asset. Selling of asset is possible only if you purchase asset some time ago. So when the PSEs were set up, the government invested money, and that is why all the shares belong to the government. Now the government wants to sell some of those shares. So selling of share means selling of asset. So that is disinvestment. So as we discuss this issue in a particular context, in general disinvestment means selling of asset. But in the context of PSEs, when we say what is disinvestment, then we have to change our answer slightly, and we have to say that disinvestment in the context of PSE means selling of shares by the government in PSEs. That is it. It may be IPO or any route. IPO is one of the routes, right? Because what is IPO? Initial public offer. So there are two ways. Say there is a company and it has 1 crore shares. Now the government, one method is that the government can sell, okay, 10 lakh shares I will sell. That is one way. But when we say IPO, so IPO means there is no selling of the existing shares. They will create, say, 50 lakh new shares and sell it to the public. So the percentage share will change. Now when the 1 crore share, every share held by the government was 100% owner. Now you are holding the same shares, but you create 50 lakh shares and sell it to others. It means now the number of shares is 1.5 crore and you are holding 1 crore. So, you are shareholder of 2/3. So, that is IPO, right. So, it depends what is the purpose of the government, how they want to do it, but disinvestment simply means selling of shares, right, and there is a lot of discussion on disinvestment. Then expenditure side, very important, and that is part of your syllabus also, though that is given in your syllabus as agriculture subsidies, but we should study it in a broader context, subsidies. Why agriculture subsidy only? Subsidies, because agriculture will be taken care. Now, why subsidy is such a big issue here? Because subsidy, whatever subsidy the government is giving, it is a sort of expenditure. It is a consumption type expenditure. And if the government is giving subsidy, it may be good subsidy, it may be bad subsidy. So, whether it is out of some populist measure, like you see just before the elections it happens, in states also it happens, like Bengal and overall 5 states, you see what the political parties are doing there, they are announcing all sort of things. Sometimes they offer goods like a scooty to girls, laptops, cycle, what not, they are announcing everything, right. Now, this is absolutely bad, but if your subsidy is meant for increasing efficiency, if your subsidy is meant to support the poor households or to weaker sectors of the economy, then the same subsidy is good. So, there is a need to analyze everything, right. For example, another thing I tell you, that subsidy should also, when we give it, whether it is going to rich or going to poor, that is very important. Because this subsidy is a very big expenditure head today, and the total tax revenue of the central government, I tell you, it is just approximately 10%, or it is fluctuating between 10 and 11% of GDP. And can you believe that more than 2% of GDP is subsidy expenditure? Means 20% out of the total revenue, more than 20% is going to subsidy. Obviously, this is huge expenditure. Now, if you want to control it, it should be better targeted. It should not go to those who are not supposed to get it. For that, we need lot of reforms, but sometimes these reforms are politically sensitive, like you see Kisan farmers agitation is going on. I tell you frankly that none of these issues raised in those or addressed in those acts are wrong. Everything is fine in those, but it has been politicized in such a manner. Why? Because the different farmer groups have different set of targets to be achieved. Now, larger part of these benefits that are going to the farm sector are cornered by big farmers, these intermediaries. The Farm Act is just trying to address that. Maybe there are to be corrections. So, we should work on corrections, reforms within that act. But then it is also a fact that more than half of this government support is going to just 5% of big farmers. That is why small farmers are not agitating. They have nothing to do with MSP and whatever. They are happy with Kisan Samman Nidhi, because if they sell their crop in MSP, they may get 1,000 rupees more for the crop, but the government is giving them 6,000 rupees per year. So, it is more than covered. So, the small farmers are not worried And if you pressurize the government more, tomorrow they will increase it to 10,000 rupees per year. Okay? That is well targeted. Only small and marginal farmers are getting it. So, it is a very tricky issue in fact. Dehradun is asking a very politically sensitive question that do you think these farmers' protests are just a propaganda to protect the concentration of wealth in top brass which is there in existence from quite a long time. You see, I will say just one thing, that the benefits not this time only, since independence, or rather I will say since 1960s when all these systems developed, were designed in such a manner that the larger part of the benefit is going to big farmers at the cost of small farmers, and we need to correct it. If these acts are capable enough to do that, it is fine. Otherwise, there should be further reforms, because if we say that this is for small and marginal farmers of India, 86% of them are small and marginal. We are giving huge money for this, but ultimately more than 50% of that end up with 5% big farmers. It is our failure or not? Right? Okay, fine. You say that we are big farmers and US gives lot of subsidy to big farmers. So, you say it and take it from the government. But why you are taking it in the name of small farmers? That is my point of view. If the government has the capacity to pay like US, you take the subsidy, but then you take in the name of big farmer, not in the name of small farmers. That is not the principle of equity, right? And that happens in India in many ways. We have vulnerable sections, and in the name of vulnerable sections, the money is being spent by the government. Ultimately, that is not reaching there. And that is, I say, a waste of money, because the targeted group is not getting it. So, it should be well targeted, that is what I can say, right, because I do not want to get involved in the political things, right. So, fiscal issues you understand, budget, fiscal policy, how to reduce the fiscal deficit, how to control it, contain it, tax reform, GST, VAT, everything is part of your syllabus. Then last part is external sector. Now, what is external stability? External means when we give and take with rest of the world. Obviously, when we sell goods outside the country, that you can call export, we earn foreign exchange. But at the same time we import, then we pay in foreign exchange. So, when I say external sector stability, I mean the balance between income of foreign exchange and expenditure of foreign exchange. And again here I say that balance does not mean zero, because India is a developing country. So, obviously, our import needs are more. We are also energy deficient country. I do not know whether you are aware about these things or not. 85% of crude oil we are importing, we are producing just 15% of it. 50% of gas we are importing. So, obviously, our import dependence is there, but we need to match it with our exports. Even if there is a deficit, this deficit should be under control. And this, in this context, we use a word that is called CAD, current account deficit. You may have read this word. What is CAD? Current account deficit means import and exports of goods and services. Import and exports of goods and services. This is the simplest way to explain it, but when we discuss balance of payments. In balance of payments, then we classify it more, and then we go into the detail of it. But as of now, this is enough. CAD means the balance between import and export of goods and services, and this should also be under control, though there is no level that can be said as perfect. But yes, in Indian case, I will say that within 2% of GDP, it is okay, right. This year, you may have read in the newspapers, this is not a deficit, this is a surplus, but this is surplus because of some circumstances, sudden drop in imports, right, because the slowdown in the economy. You know, why we import many things? There are two things that we import. One, that is a consumer goods, another the producer goods. Consumer goods that we consume directly. But as the income was badly affected, our consumption levels came down. Right. At least the unnecessary consumption we curtailed. And most of these imported things that we use are unnecessary consumption items, larger part of it, not 100%. And then producer things like plant, machinery, raw material, intermediate goods. Now, when there was economic slowdown and there was shutdown of the economy for 2 months, obviously, there was no need to import all this. So, there was sudden drop in imports, and because of that we have a surplus here, but this is not a regular feature. You know, out of the 74 years after independence, we have surplus in just 6 years, including this year. Before this year, 2021, last time we had a surplus, it was in the year 2003-4. So, 2003-4 or now this is 2021, 17 years. After 17 years, we have a surplus, and I tell you, as the economy recovers, next year again there will be a deficit. Because when your economy grows faster, your import needs increase, and then exports follow it, but most of the time it fails to match the import. Okay. So, CAD is not a problem, but large CAD is a problem. So, one thing external, and as we are talking about external, so obviously the trade policies become important, because trade policies are used to boost export, or they may be used to restrict imports, or maybe both. So, what has been our trade policies since independence? How this changed with time? What is the present trade policy? You know, like we have 5-year plans, we have 5-year trade policies also, and every time it is announced, at least for 1 year, for your exam it is important, and it was due to be revised in 2020, but because of the COVID that did not happen. So, that is now the old policy was continued for another year. Now, maybe in April they come up with a new trade policy. There may not be much revision in the policy, but there will be a fresh 5-year policy. And as it is announced in April, if it is announced, then for 1 year, for all exams, it will be important, right. So, let us see what happens. So, all the trade policies, issues related with current account deficit, this is important for your exam. This is external part. Now, this monetary, fiscal and external, I call it core economics, because all the economic concepts are involved here. Growth, that is more related with policies of the government, schemes and programs. Poverty and employment also, that is more related with the schemes and programs. And this is the understanding of the functioning of the economy, that is the stability. So, I hope now you realize what is your syllabus, right. And this realization is very important. I have a question, what is the difference between CAD and trade balance? I did not want to go into that, but as you have asked, you see actually current account word when we say CAD, current account, it includes two things. One is the goods part and another is the services part, but generally we do not use the word services here, it is called invisibles. So, CAD has two parts, one is goods, when it is only goods and goods import and goods export, it is called trade account. When it is services or invisibles, it is called invisible account. And when you combine the two, this becomes current account. So, when we use the term trade, we are talking about goods only. That is one part of the current. But when we say current account, it means all the current transactions. Right? For example, let me he has raised a question, so I am tempted to ask a question to all of you. India receives lot of money from the Indians working abroad, and that number is big. So, China is also doing the same. So, which country, this transfer of money is called remittance, right? Remittance income. So, which country in the world is largest recipient of remittance income, right? Now, I am asking this question, so if you guess, obviously I will ask this question if India is number 1. I will never ask the question if India is not number 1. So, China is number 2, India is number 1. And you know how much is that amount? That is approximately, that fluctuates every year, but for if I take the average of past 2, 3, 4 years, it is moving around $70 billion per year. It is a huge amount. Now, if you understand this, only then you can appreciate that why the Prime Minister meets the Indians working abroad. We should be thankful to those people. Many people, like many of us, I never visited abroad, but it does not mean that I should be jealous of those who are working abroad, right? Because we have different functions to perform, right? So, but those who are working abroad, we should have a different feeling about them. Many people may say that they are enjoying their life, they have left India and we are suffering here. That is one way to think. But when I think about those people, that is their life, whatever they are doing, I have nothing to do with that. But why I am happy about them, they are sending $70 billion every year to India. I am more interested in their money sending to India. If they are leading a better life, so what is the problem? They are Indians. So why I should be jealous about it, right? So, $70 billion. So, remittance income, where will it go? Yes, Dehradun, you are correct. It will come to this invisible part, remittance. You know what is the literal meaning of remittance? Remittance actually is a word from banking system. So, when the money is sent from one place to the other, it is called remittance. Even within the country, like banks are sending money from one place to other, if you talk to a banking person, he will say remittance. Like na remittance aa gaya, it means your money has been delivered. Remittance. So, remittance is sending money from one place to the other. That is the general meaning of it. But in this context, remittance means the money sent by Indians to the home country. Okay. So, this is the first part of my discussion, and this was about the syllabus. Now, the next we have to discuss is the various concepts that are directly or indirectly involved, right. So, take it as introduction to Indian economy, because I believe most of you are beginners, right. So, you need to understand some very basic things, and then I will enter into the chapters, right, because once we enter into chapter, then we do not get the opportunity to explain the basic things to you, right. So, first I will Dehradun is asking that black money transferred to Swiss bank etc. is also remittance. No, technically it is not remittance, because this is not being sent through proper banking channel, right. This is through Hawala. Ludhiana is saying that please tell the team to send books on time. As per information provided to me, that books have already been dispatched and it should be reaching to your place very soon, right. So, let us again go back to the same word growth, because I started the discussion from here. So, growth, and I told you that growth means increase in production, right. So, there is no need to write that thing again, increase in production, and when we measure the total production we call it GDP. So, the concept etc. I will discuss in the chapter, because we have to discuss national income accounting, what is GDP, GNP, NDP, NNP, what is factor income, what is market price, what is current price, what is constant price, what is personal income, what is disposable. So, there are so many concepts there. So, that is a full fledged chapter, I will discuss separately, but for the time being I am saying that GDP, it is the total production or the value of total production in the economy is called gross domestic product or GDP. So, growth is represented by GDP, but we use another word that is called development. Now, my question to you is, are the two words same or there is a difference? So, obviously, there is a difference, because growth is focusing just on production. If you read the NCERT that I have suggested, the first chapter is about growth and development in that book, NCERT. So, if you want, you have not yet purchased that book, you may start from today. Yeah, you get it and start. That is the very first chapter that I am discussing today. So, the NCERT says that growth is quantitative and development is qualitative. That may be the first answer. Growth is quantitative and development is qualitative. You see what they want to tell, because quantitative means that can be easily measured. Production is easily measured. Every year we get a data about it. But when we say development, so the message here is that development is not always quantitative, it is qualitative change that the people experience, that is in fact development. That is the message behind this word, qualitative, quantitative and qualitative, right. Like maybe family income is increasing, so there is quantitative increase, but is the quality of life also increasing? May or may not be, right. But we can also say that growth is a narrow concept, because it focuses on one thing, production, but development is a wider concept. You can also say that growth is a simple concept, development is a complex concept, because what is development, it is very difficult to define, right. Growth, everybody will say increase in GDP is growth, but what is development? It is difficult to define. And that is what I am going to do for you. What is development? We need to understand that. I will start with a very simple example. See, we often visit new places, and whenever we visit new places, we observe, right? And on the basis of observation, we conclude whether the area is developed, less developed, more developed. So, when we observe, what do we observe? We may be observing the condition of roads or road connectivity. We may be observing the availability of electricity. It may be the most important thing today is communication. Like network gaya to sab gaya samajh lo. Even if we are not using the telephone, we are frequently checking. When we are moving in our area, we are confident ki network to hota hai yahan par. But when we are moving, it has become a habit of most of us. Even if we don't need to use the phone, we are just checking network to nahi chala gaya. We are so habitual of this communication. If it is something related with rural area, so whether irrigation is there or not, whether there are schools or in hospitals or not. What I mean to say, there are so many things that we may observe, and on the basis of that we say that the particular area is developed or underdeveloped. So, that makes the whole concept complex, because I listed so many things. Now, to make it convenient, we say that development has two sides. One is the economic side of development, and another is the social side of development. Economic side of development and social side of development. Now, when we say economic development, I talked about road, electricity, communication. In one word, I may use the word infrastructure. So, development, one aspect of development is infrastructure development, because infrastructure comes first, then other things happen. Suppose there is a remote village 10 kilometers away from the main road, and under some scheme, say it is Pradhan Mantri Gram Sadak Yojana, the government says, okay, now this road will be constructed. Now, once the road is constructed, infrastructure has come up. What will it change? There will be two types of changes. One, road is a facility for many. So, now some of the well-off families in that locality, that area, now they may start thinking about buying some vehicle, because earlier it was of no use. Depending on their economic status, somebody may be buying two-wheelers, others may be buying four-wheelers. This is one development, one aspect. Obviously, more people buying automobile means a boost to automobile industry. Now, just imagine that the government is constructing road in some remote area, but it is increasing the demand for Hero Honda. This is the linkage of the economy. Then many unemployed people are also there. So, this road provides an opportunity to them that, okay, we have a road. It can be now used to generate some employment as per their capacity. Somebody may buy e-rickshaw or auto rickshaw or some other vehicle. Now, there is a public transport that has started. Transportation has started, and 10-kilometer distance, you are from different parts of the country, but most part of India is densely populated. At every kilometer there is a village. and every village is a stoppage. And you know what is the meaning of a stoppage here? You know, all the auto rickshaws come and stop there in front of this building. And you know, at every stoppage, this is a very interesting feature of India. At every stoppage, there will be some chai wala, dhaba wala selling different things. If nothing, they will be selling chips and coke or kulcha chola, anything. It means this stoppage has created the opportunity for some vendors, and this is the chain that is created. And once this is infrastructure is created, some people get employment, employment gives you income, income means you move above the poverty line after some time. So infrastructure in fact is, you can't see infrastructure in isolation, and if you see infrastructure in isolation, so the story ends here. But we have to see infrastructure, how it is connected to various sectors of the economy and how it addresses the various problems. I have just tried to convey that. One side I connected it to Hero Honda, it means economic activity. Another I said unemployment, then I said poverty. That is the power of infrastructure. So, poverty issue may be addressed, unemployment, issue may be addressed. Now, this is all. You may add more things, economic activity will increase, right. Now, this is economic side of development. And it is quite interesting that for a long period of time, you know, most of the subjects that we study today, they developed as a subject during 18th and 19th century. Before that, everything was philosophy. And that is why if you read about the thinkers, it is very interesting that the same thinker has given one theory about economics, another about sociology, third about polity. Why? Because earlier everything was integrated. We divided them into different subjects, right? And now that process is still on. I remember I met one very senior teacher, professor, and I was not knowing this fact. He told that he was professor in philosophy department in Allahabad University, and at that time he was number 2, and psychology department was created. I am talking about some time 50s or 60s, when psychology became an independent subject. Earlier it was part of philosophy. So he was offered headship of the new department, and you see what was the psychology at that time. He said, no, this psychology is part of philosophy. So why should I accept the headship of a small department? I will wait for another 2 years and I will become head professor and head of the philosophy department. Okay? Because he said that ye to iska bachcha hai. Why should I head this department? Right? This is just an example, but now this process is still on and departments within departments are being created everywhere. So earlier everything was philosophy. So when the economics developed as an independent subject, initially it was believed that development means economic development, and all the experts, all the economists of that era, they accepted this. Okay, development means economic development. And they said that economic development will take care of other things. Like there are many people who still believe that just increasing per capita income is enough. No, it is not enough. But it was believed like this earlier, right? Because you know what is the best measure of, let me tell you one more thing before I move forward. If you get a question, and that is written in your NCERT also, if you get a question, what is the best measure of economic development? Tell me. I give you options, right? GDP, GNP, per capita income, per capita real income, right? A, B, C, D. Let us write it. A, B, C and D. GDP, GNP, per capita income and per capita real income. I have got a answer from Dehradun. Dehradun is saying D. And one is from Pranay Tamang, he is also saying D. I want opinion, your answer from the class. Shimla is saying C. Right? A, B, two answers, right? You see, GDP and GNP, they represent the total income. But per capita income is better than A and B because it is about per capita income, right? You see, why per capita income is better than GDP or GNP? Because development means qualitative change. Don't forget this thing. Qualitative change, not only quantitative. Suppose our economy is growing at some percent and the population is increasing faster than that. Do you think it is good? Because if our economy is growing at whatever rate, population is growing faster than that, it means the per capita income is coming down. Per capita income represents what? Purchasing power. And if your purchasing power is less, now you will be able to buy less goods and services. So, will your quality of life improve? No. It means A and B we reject outrightly. It should be C or D, per capita income or per capita real income. Now, what is better, per capita income or per capita real income? Again apply the same logic. But before that I tell you, real here means inflation adjusted. Suppose there is a family and the family income increases by 5% during the year, but the prices rise by 6% during the year. Will it be good for the family? No. Our per capita income should rise faster than the prices. Only then our purchasing capacity, purchasing power will be more, and then our quality of life will be more better. That is economic development. So, always remember this thing. This is written in NCERT also. So, when you read that, you will be reminded about this, that per capita real income is the correct answer. And here real means inflation adjusted. Everywhere, whenever you read this word real, real always means inflation adjusted. Whether it is GDP real, GNP real, per capita real, real means only one thing, after adjusting for the price rise, right? So, understand this. This is a very good question also, especially from the beginners, and it has been asked in various exams many times, which is the best measure of economic development, right? So, this economic development continued to be the basis of measuring development because of our belief that economic development means development. But when we moved forward, we reached a point where now our economists, they started analyzing globally which country has improved how much. Now, there were many countries in the world where the per capita income was increasing faster, but the social indicators remained weak. So, there was a conclusion drawn that economic development does not always lead to social development. For example, Middle East countries, they are petro-rich countries, their income was increasing, but the social sector remained backward. Now, that was the time when world over there was a debate that social sector should be involved in the overall concept of economic development. But the challenge here was that social development was even more subjective, because objective things you can measure easily, but subjective thing how will you measure? So, they said okay, we should work on it. Now, there was a person, his name was Morris, full name was Morris D. Morris, but he is popular as Morris, and he developed a new index that was called PQLI, Physical Quality of Life Index. So, quality of life word was used here, PQLI, Physical Quality of Life Index. And as it is very subjective, the first challenge for him was to select those things which are measurable, because social sector involves so many things. So, he identified three things. In PQLI, he said it will be life expectancy, LE, number 2 literacy rate, LR, and number 3 IMR, infant mortality rate. So, these three criteria were used and an index was published, and that was during 1970s, right? To be more precise 1979, but there is no need to remember exact year, means about 40 years ago. Now, this became popular because that was something new, something desirable, and this continued for some time, and now there was lot of focus on social sector development. But if you see these three criteria, life expectancy and IMR, they are related with health, and literacy rate, that is related with education. And that is why the world over, whenever there is any discussion and debate on the social sector development, the two dominant issues are, one is education and another is health, right? Education and health. And now there are different ways to measure what is the development in education. Now, the old measure is literacy rate, right? You know what is literacy rate exactly? Like when we say that in India literacy rate was 73% in 2011, that was the last census. So, what do you understand with this 73% literacy rate? Two things you have to remember, that a person who can read, write and understand, people often miss the third word. Read and write is very popular, but read, write and understand. So, you know, I tell you very interesting thing, that some years ago there was some document to be prepared for some purpose, and one of the office bearers, she was housewife and she signed in Hindi and the document was in English. So, the papers were rejected on this ground that whatever is written on these papers, this fellow cannot understand, I can't believe this. So, they demanded a separate affidavit from that person who signed in Hindi that I can read and understand the whole document. And after that affidavit was submitted, then the paper was cleared. So, reading and writing, that is popular, but do not miss the third word, understand. So, any person who can read, write and understand is literate, any language. But when we say literacy rate, it means we are talking about percentage of literates, right. But when I say 73%, does it mean that 73% of the total population? Answer is no. Because for literacy rate to be calculated, a age group is defined. So, in India when we say 73%, so here it means 73% of the population which is 7 years or above. The children are not included, children below 7 years of age are not included in the calculation of literacy rate in India. Because now in the third year of age, now kids are going to school, maybe by 5-6 years they start reading some words, paragraphs here and there, but they will not be included in the literate group or illiterate group, because they are not counted for this purpose. But there are many international organizations, they use the word adult literacy rate, and for them, what is adult? 15 years and above. In India, if you say adult, what is our imagination about this word adult? Means 25-35 years, right? That is adult. But when you say you read World Bank documents, World Economic Forum is saying something, World Bank is saying their reports, when they say literacy rate, they mean adult literacy rate, and for that it is 15 years and above. That is why there is always some difference in our national data and international data. We should not be worried about it. If you know the difference, reason of the difference, there is no need to worry. Both the data are correct, right. So, literacy rate. Similarly, health, as I mentioned, life expectancy and IMR. You know what is life expectancy? Expected life. But just mind one thing, when I say life expectancy, it does not mean I am talking about average life of those who died this year. Life expectancy means expected life, means if I say that 70 year is the life expectancy in India this year, it means the children born this year are expected to live on an average up to 70 years. And obviously, life expectancy depends on two things, level of nutrition and medical facilities, because level of nutrition gives you the strength, inner strength, and health facilities, they provide you a protection against contingencies. And what is IMR? Infant mortality rate. Now, infant here means sorry. Yes, Priyanshu is saying these days kids are asked to learn coding at 7. That is very hazardous, I guess. We are putting unnecessary pressure on the kids. Means the childhood has gone. Your kid may be performing extraordinarily at the age of 7, 8, 9, 10, but just think about the childhood. I tell you frankly that my generation in that sense is the luckiest one. We did all sort of things in life, all sort of things, and our childhood was the best. Yes. Because our previous generation, they were not free. That was British period. My generation is the first generation in free India, right? And we did lot of things in my childhood. There was no pressure to study, no pressure to come first in the class, no pressure to get 90% or more marks. In my generation, getting 60% means first division, okay, you are good student, that's it. And there was no concept of 90% and above, right? So this is, I don't actually appreciate all this. If the children, they are doing something, they like it, then it is fine. But forced by the parents doing something, no. They will be old at the age of 30. So health means IMR. Here IMR, infant mortality rate, what you have to remember is that here the word infant refers to less than 1 year. So how do we calculate IMR? The children born during the year, out of them, how many died before the age of 1 year? That is called infant mortality rate. And that is calculated not as a percentage, but as per 1,000. So if I give you one simple sentence, so if you want, you may write what is IMR. It is the number of deaths of children, number of deaths of children before 1 year of age, before 1 year of age per 1,000 live births. Per 1,000 live births. So this is simple definition, and you know, when the IMR data for the very initial period after independence is not available, but for the first time when we calculated it was during 60s, 70s, it was more than 150 per 1,000. Out of 1,000 children born, more than 150 died. Today there is a lot of improvement. We have come down to approximately 35, that is national average. Some states are doing better than the national average, obviously, but it is still far behind the developed countries where it is in units, maybe 5, 4, 3, 6, but we are at 35. There is a lot of improvement, but still there is a lot to be done, right? So that is about IMR. So health and education, if you are talking about Indian context, we may add sanitation, drinking water, etc. They are also part of the social sector, right? In international discussion, they just focus on education and health, right? So my time is over, so we have to stop here. So tomorrow I will continue with this, right? It is not the end of this topic. So tomorrow I will discuss other very basic things about the growth and development. Okay? Thank you very much.